Boy, have we been waiting for this. But just how good is the base level 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro? Well, I've got one and I've been testing it out. Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews. Thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, the button is just down there. Now, this wasn't the plan. I was going to wait until my brand new 16-inch MacBook Pro arrives in November, but the delivery time is somewhere between the 19th and the 26th of November, which is a little too far away for my liking. And what's more, virtually everyone else's review of the MacBook Pro is rolling in, and I haven't done mine yet. So I felt a bit left out, which is why yesterday I headed down to my local Apple store and bought this, which is the base level 14-inch MacBook Pro. These are my first impressions. So although I have a pretty maxed out spec 16-inch MacBook Pro on the way, I did want to get my hands on the base level 14-inch because, as always, I want to get that base level idea of how these things perform. And that's exactly what this version is. So it's the cheapest version of the new MacBook Pro you can buy, which means for £1,899 you receive the M1 Pro chip with the 8-core CPU, 14-core GPU, 16 gig of unified memory, and a 512 SSD. And in terms of this base spec, I think everything is okay apart from the SSD. 512 is such a small amount of storage these days for laptops, and particularly for pro laptops like these where the people using them are going to be working potentially with quite large files. I wish Apple set it as 1 terabyte as the minimum. They don't, but that's it. But you're still getting quite a lot for your money, really, particularly if you compare it against the previous generation where, okay, you'd get a lovely looking laptop and a laptop that would last you many, many years, but you would have lots of compromises when it comes to ports and previously the terrible keyboard. But that's not the case anymore because Apple really has gone full circle with this new MacBook Pro. I don't think I'm alone. When these were announced, when I looked at them and thought, I must be dreaming. There's no way Apple has gone this far back in terms of adding a HDMI port, the original MagSafe, an SD card slot. The only thing missing is a glowing Apple logo and a battery status indicator. It really is going right back to the original PowerBook days and also the previous generation MacBook Pros. There's no USB-A port. We were never going to see that. That would have been we must be dreaming. I can confirm none of us were dreaming. This laptop does have an SD card slot. It has a HDMI port. They've got rid of the touch bar. That's gone. That's consigned to the history books now. They have made a few odd choices, admittedly. For example, it's a bit odd that the HDMI port isn't 2.1, it's 2.0, but we'll forgive them for that. But everything else is a really nice hark back to the olden days. And the MagSafe, for example, deserves a special mention. It is pretty much the exact same MagSafe that you used to get before the previous generation MacBook Pros. The only difference really is that the magnet is a lot stronger. You can still pull it out very easily, which is the whole point of MagSafe, obviously, but it does now kind of attach with a very satisfying click, and it just feels very firm. Now, before I talk about the design, I did quickly want to mention this week's sponsor, which is Clean My Mac X. And the reason I want to mention them is because even though this is a brand new laptop, one of the first applications I put on it is Clean My Mac. That sounds odd, it's brand new, there's nothing on it, there's nothing to clean, but I really recommend getting something like Clean My Mac X installed because it gives you that app that you can use in future to get rid of big files, to look out for any viruses that might be on there. And the good news is it's really easy to install Clean My Mac X on any new Mac. Fully compatible with the M series chip, so there's no problems there. And when I first ran Clean My Mac X on my M1 Mac Mini, it cleared nearly 30 gig of just junk files that were sat there hidden from view. It's used by 5 million people globally, and it cleans terabytes of junk every single day. And lastly, there is an awesome app uninstaller, which is a godsend for someone like me. I'm always installing lots of different apps on these test machines, and it's just nice to remove them completely with Clean My Mac X. So a big thank you to MacPaw, who are the people behind Clean My Mac X and who are sponsoring this video very kindly. And to find out more about Clean My Mac X, check out the link in the description. On to the design of this new MacBook Pro, and this is a chunky laptop. I mentioned this on my Discord server and I think on Twitter when it first was announced. I mentioned the fact that it looked really chunky compared to the outgoing version. And a few people said, don't worry, that's just the non-taper design and the product photography is making it look chunkier than it is. Trust me, this is a chunky laptop. As a lot of people have already mentioned, it's got real sort of PowerBook vibes. That's what it reminds me of, the original PowerBook. And it's heavy too. It's a heavy laptop. That was the first thing that struck me. When I got it out of the box, I thought, wow, this is the heaviest MacBook I've owned for a long time. It does make me wonder how heavy that 16-inch MacBook Pro is going to be. We will see. But I love it. I absolutely love this design. And it's what professionals and hobbyists have been crying out for. Sure, it's lovely to have a thin laptop that slips into any bag and doesn't bother you when you've got your rucksack on your shoulders, but most professionals, and as I say, hobbyists, will forgo that diet if it means we get the power that we want. And that's exactly what Apple has done with this MacBook Pro. They've made it thicker, they've made it heavier, and they've done that so that it is as powerful as it should be. It clearly means business. I mean, look, there's certain design touches that illustrate that really. So the Apple logo on the front is really bold, really bold. It's much bigger than on previous generations. And there's this lovely kind of etched MacBook Pro on the underside of the device, which just kind of stamps its authority. Just a point of note, they have got rid of the MacBook Pro label on the screen bezel, which is interesting. But it's such a step back in time for Apple and very unlike them. And I refuse to believe that there weren't several people at Apple who were very uneasy about the decision to go down this route with the design. But someone, or several people, were confident enough to say, no, we are doing this. We're going to make it thicker, heavier, because that is what people want. I love the black keyboard as well. I think Rene Ritchie pointed out that there could be issues with that in terms of people with impaired vision. It kind of does remove some of the contrast that you used to get between the metal back and the black keys. It's just all this is like a sea of black now. And it serves no purpose other than to kind of illustrate that you've got the new MacBook Pro, but Apple always does this one way or another. Right, the notch. Let's just get this out of the way quickly. I just think it's a bit of an easy, lazy criticism to level at the new MacBook Pro. It doesn't matter. So just to get one thing very clear, the notch only obscures the menu bar. If, for instance, you go full screen in an app, it just disappears completely. You just have a slightly thicker bezel at the top. Similarly, if you're watching 16:9 video content, it vanishes, it's just not there. And it's not even there if you watch full screen video content, because again, it just disappears. Now, it is a little bit odd that you can lose your mouse pointer behind the notch, and also people who have a lot of menu bar widgets and things on there may find it a bit annoying potentially, but in general everyday use, I've only had this for a day to be fair, you just get past it. And I think just like the iPhone, the notch on the MacBook is just going to become a defining feature of Apple's laptops going forward. What is interesting though is the new screen, and this screen is fantastic. The colour, the brightness, and just the sheer expansiveness of that screen thanks to those smaller bezels and the notch make it a wonderful device to work on. The only slight letdown for me is ProMotion. And just very quickly, if you're not sure what ProMotion is, it is all to do with the screen refresh rate. And ProMotion can intelligently ramp up and ramp down the screen refresh rate depending on what you're doing. So if you're reading text on a website, for example, it can ramp it straight up to 120 Hertz and give you a very smooth scrolling effect, basically. And if you're watching a movie, it will take it down to the refresh rate that matches the movie, if it's 24 frames a second, 48, whatever it is. Now, this works very well on the iPhone and the iPad, and on both devices, it's very noticeable. I can't really notice it on this MacBook Pro. Maybe it's me, but you can very easily switch between ProMotion and 60 Hertz, for example. I've done that on different types of content. I can't spot it at all. It feels like a very smooth screen anyway, even at 60 Hertz. But apart from that, it remains one of the best laptop screens you're ever going to come across. And the fact that it borrows so much technology from Apple's super expensive Pro XDR display, such as color profiles and reference modes, just makes it a beast of a screen for video editors and photographers. Right, performance. I've only had this laptop for 24 hours, and as you know, I don't do benchmarks. I have no interest in them. I'm much more interested in how these things perform day to day for normal tasks, and if you're creative like myself, how it gets you through a video edit. I don't care really what the numbers mean. It's just how it feels and how it benefits my business and my life. But I did run a quick test on it just out of interest really to see how it performed against the M1 Mac Mini and the M1 MacBook Air. So I took a 20-minute piece of 4K footage, which was shot at 24 frames a second, 422 and 10-bit color, if you're interested. And I did two things. The first thing was I did a little color grade just to initiate a render, and then I exported that file to H.264. All done in Final Cut Pro, and this is what happened. So my M1 MacBook Air, which is the 8GB version, the 7-core GPU, the base level, cheapest one you can get, that rendered the footage in 9 minutes and 8 seconds, and it exported it in 10 minutes, 20 seconds. I'll come on to that in a moment. moment. The M1 Mac Mini, which is the machine I've done pretty much all of the videos for this channel on so far, it's the 16 gig version of the M1 chip. That rendered in 6 minutes 37 seconds and exported in 12 minutes 53 seconds. Then onto the M1 Pro base level 14-inch MacBook Pro. That rendered in 3 minutes 14 seconds and exported in 9 minutes 54 seconds. Now, if someone can explain why the M1 MacBook Air exported quicker than the M1 Mac Mini, tell me in the comments. Really strange. It was the exact same footage, no change, same version of Final Cut Pro, nothing else running. But moving on to the MacBook Pro, I'm not surprised by those results. It's going to be quicker, but it kind of illustrates just how far the M1 architecture has come in just over a year. So in this test, it's effectively halved the render time, which is a big deal. It's taken a meaningful amount of time off an export, which again, when you're doing lots of videos each week, means a lot, and you'll claw back lots of time. However, this is only the base level version. It has a 14-core GPU, and the 16-inch version that I have on the way has a 32-core GPU. It also has double the memory bandwidth of this one. I can't wait to see how that performs on a similar test. So obviously I will return with the 16-inch MacBook Pro and do another test between this one and that, just to see what the difference is between there. But if you're thinking of upgrading from the standard M1 to the M1 Pro, and you don't want to spend any more than the base level version, you are going to see a significant uplift in speed when it comes to things like video editing. I'm not a developer, so I can't give you any kind of meaningful results in terms of compiling code. But again, if you watch the other reviews, they're all saying the same thing. These M1 Pro chips are pretty immense. Battery life, again, I've not had it long enough to give you a proper assessment of this. However, I think you know when you're onto a good thing with a battery, and I think I am with this laptop, and there's two reasons for that. The first one is yesterday, when I got it, I took it out of the box, didn't plug it in at all, took it to the studio, powered it up, ran loads of tests on it, did loads of B-roll, whacked up the screen brightness to 100%, left it on all afternoon, didn't have any of the power saving options turned on, and I reckon it used about 15% battery. Last night, charged it up to 100%. This morning, I used it for a good 2 hours. Again, I wasn't doing video editing, I was just doing normal kind of work stuff and writing and what have you. It stayed at 100% for that entire 2 hours. And none of that is a scientific test. I know I need longer with it to give you a proper assessment of that, but Apple made such a big play for battery life during their Unleashed event when they revealed these laptops. And it's clear that they want people to be able to do long video edits, music production, and coding on the battery for as long as possible. And I've got a really good feeling about this MacBook Pro in that respect. I'm not worried about the battery life. Like I say, I will report back, but initial impressions, I think it's going to be stonking in that regard. So in summary, I think we are onto a really exciting thing with these new MacBooks. The 14-inch, the base level 14-inch version, will suit most people, I think. It's clear that this is a very powerful laptop. Those Final Cut Pro tests that I did, that is as quick as anything I've ever used. I've never had a computer as quick as this one in terms of rendering footage and exporting it. And you do start to wonder, if you go to the M1 Max and then, like I have, go to the 32-core GPU, how much faster can it get? In all reality, I could quite happily run my entire business from this. Bearing in mind, I've been doing that with the Mac Mini, the M1 16 gig version, for the last nearly 12 months. So if you are looking to not spend too much money on a new MacBook and you want enough power to see you through for the next 3-4 years, and you're not working with loads of 8K footage and what have you, although from the other tests I've seen, it deals with that pretty well as well, then this is a superb buy. The only thing I'd say is if you're working with very, very big files, then upgrade the memory. This has only got it's got 16 gig. I think 32 would be a better choice for you if that's the case. I'm genuinely thinking, do I need that 16-inch MacBook Pro? I'm getting it, obviously, and I will return with a review of that and a comparison between that and this one, but this is an incredibly good laptop, and it's chunky, it's heavy, it doesn't make any noise, the fans didn't come on yesterday at all, it doesn't really get very warm, and I think this is just the start of where the M chips go next. It's a brilliant time to be a Mac user. Now, if you still have some time and you want to see me very tired talking about the Unleashed event, then keep watching for a link to that video, which I did last week in a hotel room in Canada. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.